I watched my sister Julia step out of the salon, her newly dyed silver hair catching the afternoon sunlight, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. She looked like she'd dunked her head in a bucket of dishwater mixed with ash. The dye job was patchy, brassy in some spots, almost purple in others, and it clashed horrifically with her warm-toned complexion. She'd clearly gone to the cheapest place she could find, expecting to replicate my professional platinum silver balayage that had cost me $3,000 and 6 hours in the chair of the city's most exclusive colorist. "It looks amazing, right?" she called out to me, her voice carrying that familiar edge of competition that had defined our entire lives. She twirled a blood, and I could see the damage. Her hair was fried, breaking off at the ends, and the color was so uneven it looked like a botched DIY job from a box. Which, knowing Julia's cheap nature when it came to herself, it probably was. "Sure," I said, sipping my coffee at the outdoor cafe across the street, not bothering to hide my smirk. "Very unique." Her face fell slightly, but she recovered quickly, flipping her damaged locks over her shoulder as she strutted toward me. This was Julia's pattern, and I knew it by heart now. I'd known it would happen the moment I'd showed up to Mom's birthday dinner last month with my new silver hair, professionally done, shimmering like moonlight. I'd seen the envy flash across her face, seen her fingers twitch toward her own dark brown hair, seen the gears turning in her mind because Julia didn't just want what I had. She wanted to be me. And in my first life, I'd let her get away with it. I'd let her steal everything from me until there was nothing left, not even my life. But this time, I knew exactly what was coming. And this time, I was ready. The memories of my first life hit me every morning like a freight train. And even 4 months after waking up in my 23-year-old body again, they hadn't dulled. I remembered everything: the betrayal, the systematic destruction of everything I'd built, the way my family had stood by and watched, or worse, actively helped Julia take it all from me. It started small, like it always did with Julia. We'd grown up in a comfortable middle-class home in suburban Connecticut, the daughters of Margaret Chen, a successful real estate agent, and Richard Chen, a software engineer. I was the older daughter by 2 years, which meant I was also the practice child, the one they experimented on while they figured out parenting. Julia was the baby, the one who came along when they'd finally gotten their footing, and from the moment she could form coherent thoughts, she'd been obsessed with everything I did. When I was 7 and took ballet, Julia insisted on ballet lessons too. When I learned piano, she demanded a keyboard. When I made the honor roll, she studied twice as hard to match me. Our parents thought it was adorable, this sisterly competition. They called it motivation. They said Julia looked up to me, that it was sweet how she wanted to be like her big sister. But I saw the truth in her eyes even then. It wasn't admiration, it was resentment. She didn't want to be like me. She wanted to be me, to erase me and take my place. In high school, it escalated. When I got asked to prom by Derek Hannigan, the captain of the soccer team, Julia threw such a fit that she made herself sick. She cried for days, claiming I'd stolen her crush, even though she'd never mentioned Derek before in her life. She manipulated our parents so effectively that they actually asked me to decline the invitation, to let Julia have a chance at happiness. When I refused, Julia went to Derek herself and told him I was only using him to make another guy jealous. She showed him doctored text messages, twisted stories, and convinced him I was playing games. Derek took her to prom instead. I should have seen it then. The sociopathy hiding behind her pretty face and practiced tears. But the worst was yet to come. That didn't happen until after college. I'd gotten into Columbia University on a full academic scholarship, majoring in computer science with a minor in business. I'd worked my ass off, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working part-time to cover my living expenses that the scholarship didn't include. Julia went to a state school, scraped by with average grades, and spent most of her time partying and building her Instagram following. After graduation, I landed a job at a prestigious tech startup in Manhattan. The company was small but growing fast, with revolutionary AI technology that was about to change the industry. I was one of their first 20 employees, and I received stock options as part of my compensation package. The salary was modest, but I believed in the company's vision, and more importantly, I believed in myself. I worked 80-hour weeks, poured my soul into that company, and helped develop 3 of their core algorithms. 3 years later, the company's valuation had exploded. We were preparing for an IPO, and my stock options were suddenly worth millions. Millions. At 26 years old, I was about to become independently wealthy based on nothing but my own hard work and intelligence. That's when Julia struck. She'd been working as a social media influencer with moderate success, about 50,000 followers who watched her try on clothes and film day in the life videos. She'd also been dating Marcus, my boyfriend of 2 years. Or rather, he thought he was my boyfriend. Looking back with the clarity that death and rebirth provides, I realized he'd been Julia's plant all along. Marcus had appeared in my life so naturally, I never questioned it. We'd met at a coffee shop near my office, bonded over a shared love of science fiction novels, and started dating. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my work. He asked thoughtful questions about my projects, remembered details about my company, and supported my long hours. What I didn't know was that he was feeding every piece of information I shared with him directly to Julia. Every password I mentioned, every detail about the company's structure, every private complaint I made about management, it all went straight to my sister. The betrayal happened 2 weeks before the IPO. I came into work one Monday morning to find the office in chaos. Over the weekend, someone had leaked our proprietary algorithms to our biggest competitor. Not just leaked, sold. For a substantial sum, apparently. The board was in emergency meetings, the legal team was scrambling, and the prime suspect, based on digital forensics, appeared to be me. The evidence was overwhelming. The leaks had come from my computer, using my credentials, during hours when I was documented as being in the office. My personal email contained correspondence with the competitor's representatives. My bank account showed a mysterious deposit of $75,000 3 days before the leak, which I couldn't explain because I hadn't put it there. I was fired immediately. My stock options were revoked as per the morality clause in my contract. The company filed criminal charges against me for corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets. I was arrested. Perp walked out of the building I'd helped build in handcuffs while news cameras rolled. Julia's Instagram exploded with heartbroken posts about her sister's betrayal, her shock and disappointment, her tearful videos about never knowing someone could lie so convincingly. The truth, which I pieced together too late, was that Marcus had installed keyloggers on my laptop months earlier. He'd cloned my credentials, learned my patterns, and executed the entire scheme while I was in the office but away from my desk. The money in my account had been transferred from an offshore account that Julia had set up in my name. I found out later she'd stolen my identity documents years ago. The emails had been sent from a spoofed address that mimicked mine perfectly. And because I was so focused on proving my innocence, I didn't notice Julia sliding into my life until it was too late. She started dating my ex-colleagues, networking her way into the tech scene, positioning herself as the good sister who'd been victimized by her criminal sibling. She got a job as a brand consultant for the very company I'd helped build, leveraging her influencer status and her sob story about me. When the criminal charges were finally dropped, 18 months later, after I'd spent my life savings on lawyers and private investigators who proved the hack came from outside my direct control, the damage was done. I was unhireable in tech. My reputation was destroyed. Every Google search of my name brought up the corporate espionage scandal. I was 30 years old, broke, blacklisted, and broken. I moved back in with my parents, who regarded me with disappointment and suspicion, despite my proven innocence. Julie had spent those 18 months poisoning them against me, showing them concerning text messages I'd allegedly sent, sharing worrying stories about my mental instability, painting herself as the long-suffering sister who'd tried to help me but been rebuffed. The IPO went through. The company became a unicorn. The early employees, including the stock options that should have been mine, became millionaires. Julia, through her position at the company and her relationship with Marcus, who'd conveniently stood by her through her family crisis, received generous consulting contracts. She parlayed her Instagram following into a tech influencer brand, interviewing CEOs and covering startup culture. She moved into a penthouse in Tribeca. She wore designer clothes and flew first class and lived the life that should have been mine. And me? I worked as a barista, then as a retail clerk, then when the depression became too much, I stopped working altogether. I spent my days in my childhood bedroom scrolling through Julia's Instagram, watching her live my life, wear my success like a costume she'd stolen from my closet. My parents grew increasingly frustrated with me. Why couldn't I move on? Why was I so bitter? Why couldn't I be happy for my sister's success? Didn't I understand that holding on to anger was only hurting myself? When I tried to explain, tried to show them the evidence my lawyers had compiled, tried to make them see that Julia had orchestrated everything, they dismissed it as conspiracy theories and jealousy. Julia had been so careful, so thorough in her manipulation. She'd spent years building the narrative that I was the troubled one, the jealous older sister who'd always resented her. The final betrayal came on my 33rd birthday. My parents sat me down and told me they were selling the house I'd grown up in, the house that held every memory of my childhood before Julia had poisoned it. They were downsizing, they said, moving to a condo in Florida. And no, there wasn't room for me. It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet, my mother said, her voice cold in a way it had never been during my childhood. Julia managed to build a whole life for herself. Why can't you? That night, I took an entire bottle of sleeping pills. I didn't want to die exactly. I just wanted the pain to stop. I wanted the memories to fade. I wanted to stop seeing Julia's smug smile every time I closed my eyes, stop hearing her false sympathy in my nightmares, stop living in a world where she'd won so completely. I died alone in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by participation trophies from a life I'd lost, while Julia posted Instagram stories from Paris Fashion Week. And then I woke up. I opened my eyes on the morning of March 15th in my old apartment in Manhattan, in my 23-year-old body, exactly 10 years before my death. I knew the date immediately because it was seared into my memory. This was the morning after I'd received my first major stock option grant from the startup. This was the morning I'd called my family, excited to share the news. This was the morning everything had started. I lay in bed for 3 hours, hyperventilating, as the memories crashed over me. Both lives felt real. Both lives felt present. I remembered being 23 and optimistic, and I remembered being 33 and broken. And I remembered the pills dissolving on my tongue. When I finally got out of bed, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and stared at myself. Young. Undamaged. My hair was still its natural dark brown, cut in the same shoulder-length style I'd worn throughout college. My face was unlined, uncried over. My eyes still had hope in them, but in my mind I carried 10 years of betrayal, manipulation, and loss. And I knew exactly what was coming. The first thing I did was change all my passwords, every single one, to randomized strings of characters I stored in an encrypted password manager. I installed security software on all my devices. I set up 2-factor authentication on everything. I went through my apartment and checked every corner, every device, every book, looking for anything Julia or Marcus might have planted during visits I now vaguely remembered. Because Marcus. Marcus was already in my life in this timeline. We'd been dating for 3 months. He'd already been asking about my work, already been interested in the company, already been positioning himself as the supportive boyfriend. The second thing I did was break up with him. I met him for coffee and ended it cleanly, offering no explanation beyond it's not working for me. He tried to argue, tried to convince me to reconsider, and I saw the flash of panic in his eyes that I'd been too naive to notice the first time around. He needed to stay close to me. He needed access. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I was sorry I'd wasted 3 months on a human parasite. It's over. I blocked his number, blocked him on all social media, and informed my building's doorman that he was no longer welcome. Then I waited to see what Julia would do. She called me 3 days later, her voice syrupy with false concern. Marcus told me you guys broke up. Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? I'm fine, I said shortly. It wasn't serious. But you guys seemed so happy. The probe in her voice was obvious now that I knew to listen for it. She was fishing, trying to understand if this derailed her plans or if she needed to pivot. We weren't. Is there something else you needed, Julia? No, I worry about you. You work so hard and I don't want you to be lonely. I'm not lonely. I have to go. I hung up and sat in my apartment, my heart pounding. The first domino had been pushed. Now I needed to make sure the rest of them never fell. Over the next few months, I became someone else. Not the naive, trusting woman I'd been before, but someone harder, smarter, I was pleasant to Julia when necessary, cold when possible. I stopped sharing details about my work. When she asked about the company, I was vague. When she suggested we grab coffee near my office, I was always too busy. I could see her frustration growing. She'd come over to my apartment and try to use my laptop, claiming hers was dead, and I'd politely refuse. She'd suggest double dates, trying to introduce me to amazing guys who were obviously her plants, and I'd decline. She'd post Instagram photos of us together, tagging me, trying to maintain the facade of sisterly closeness, and I'd untag myself. Our parents noticed the distance. "Why are you being so cold to your sister?" my mother asked during a Sunday dinner I couldn't avoid. "She's worried about you." "I'm just busy with work," I said. "Nothing personal." Julia's eyes met mine across the table, and I saw the calculation there. She was trying to figure out if I suspected something, if I knew something, or if I was just being difficult. In the original timeline, she wouldn't make her major move for another 3 years. She'd needed time to set everything up, to position Marcus, to lay the groundwork. But I wasn't going to wait 3 years for her to strike. I was going to make the first move. That's when I started planning my revenge. The thing about Rebirth is that it gives you an unfair advantage. I knew Julia's playbook. I knew exactly how she thought, how she planned, how she manipulated. I knew her weaknesses, her insecurities, her deepest fears. And I knew that the key to destroying her wasn't just to prevent her from destroying me. It was to let her think she was winning, right up until the moment I took everything from her, just like she'd done to me. My first strategic move was to build my own fortress. I met with a lawyer and set up an ironclad estate plan with trusts and beneficiaries that explicitly excluded Julia. I documented every interaction we had, every text message, every phone call. I kept a detailed journal of her manipulation attempts, time-stamped and backed up to secure cloud storage. I transferred a significant portion of my growing savings to offshore accounts she couldn't trace. Then I started laying traps. I created a fake email account and a fake computer profile that I occasionally used in Julia's presence, making sure she saw me type in simple passwords like Columbia 2015 and stock options. I populated this fake digital identity with just enough real information to make it seem legitimate. But everything that mattered, my actual work files, my communications with my company, my financial information, was protected on completely separate systems she'd never seen. I also got smarter about my company. I realized that my most valuable asset wasn't the stock options themselves, it was the knowledge in my head. I knew which algorithms would be most valuable. I knew which competitors would try to steal them. I knew which board members were trustworthy and which weren't. So I started building relationships with the right people. I had coffee with the CEO and subtly mentioned the importance of security protocols. I befriended the head of legal and casually discussed non-compete clauses and IP protection. I made sure that when the time came, I would have allies who trusted me and would believe my version of events. And then, 6 months after my rebirth, I dyed my hair. It started as a whim, honestly. I was walking past an upscale salon in Soho and saw a woman emerge with the most stunning silver platinum balayage I'd ever seen. It looked like liquid moonlight, like she'd bathed her hair in stardust. The color was complex, multiple shades of silver and white and the faintest hint of blue, all blended so seamlessly it looked natural, like she'd been born with hair the color of a winter sky. And I thought Julia would die for this. I walked into the salon and made an appointment with Dimitri, their master colorist, who had a 6-month waiting list. I dropped my company's name, mentioned that we were about to go public and would be looking for a salon partner for our executive team, and suddenly he had an opening next week. The transformation took 6 hours and $3,000. Dimitri was an artist, carefully painting each section of my hair, tonering it multiple times to achieve the perfect, cool-toned platinum that complemented my features. When he was done, I looked like a different person. Expensive, powerful, untouchable. I posted one photo on my private Instagram, just one casual shot of me in the salon chair with the caption, "New Year, New Me," even though it was June, and waited. Julia's response came within an hour. "OMG, that color is amazing! Where did you get it done?" I ignored the message. She tried again the next day. "Hey, I want to get my hair done like yours. Can you send me your stylist's info?" Again, I didn't respond. Then came the phone call. "Are you seriously ghosting me over a hair color?" That's so petty, even for you. I've been busy, I said. And no, I'm not sending you Dimitri's information. Find your own stylist. Why are you being such a bitch about this? It's just hair. Then go to any salon. I'm sure they can match it. I hung up and I smiled. Because I knew Julia. I knew she'd become obsessed with matching my hair, just like she'd become obsessed with matching everything else I'd ever done. And I knew she'd be too proud and too cheap to actually pay for a quality dye job. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, she showed up at Sunday dinner with badly dyed silver hair that looked like she'd done it herself with a box from CVS. It was patchy, brassy, damaged, and made her look washed out and ill. It's different, my mother said diplomatically. I love it, Julia said defensively, glaring at me. It's the same as yours. If you say so, murmured, letting my professional platinum catch the light. The comparison between us was brutal. My hair looked expensive because it was expensive. It looked maintained because I returned to Dimitri every 6 weeks for toning and conditioning treatments. It looked natural because it had been carefully matched to my skin tone and features. Julia's hair looked like a costume, like she was wearing a cheap wig, like she was trying desperately to be someone she wasn't. And the beautiful thing was, she couldn't fix it without admitting defeat. She couldn't go to a professional colorist without acknowledging that her DIY job was garbage. She couldn't change it back to brown without admitting that she'd only dyed it silver to copy me in the first place. She was stuck looking like a poor imitation, and every time we appeared together, at family dinners, at public events, in photos, the contrast became more obvious. People started commenting on it. Friends would ask us, "Are you guys trying to do a twin thing?" And then look closer and say, "Oh, but yours is so much prettier," to me. Julia's Instagram followers started leaving comments. "Why'd you copy your sister's hair? And the silver doesn't really work for your complexion." She was humiliated, trapped by her own competitive obsession, and it was only the beginning. The hair was just the opening gambit. The real revenge required patience, strategy, and a thorough understanding of Julia's psychology. I knew that she wouldn't be able to resist trying to destroy me eventually. It was in her nature, like a scorpion stinging, even when it meant her own death. My job was to make sure that when she struck, she destroyed herself instead. The opportunity came 8 months after my rebirth. My company announced that we were beginning the formal IPO process. The stock options I held were suddenly very, very real, with a clear path to liquidity. Based on our preliminary valuation, I was looking at a payout in the vicinity of $8 million. I was 24 years old and about to become wealthy beyond my wildest dreams, purely on the merit of my own work and intelligence. And Julia couldn't stand it. She started showing up at my apartment more frequently, always with some excuse. She needed to borrow a dress. She wanted to grab lunch nearby. She missed spending time with her big sister. Every visit was an opportunity for her to snoop, to try to access my laptop, to fish for information about the company and the IPO. I let her think she was succeeding. I would leave my decoy laptop out where she could see it, occasionally stepping away to take phone calls or use the bathroom, giving her opportunities to try to access it. The laptop was loaded with fake but convincing information, spreadsheets showing stock projections, emails discussing the IPO timeline, even a folder labeled Confidential IPO Docs that was actually filled with nonsense. I also started dating again, publicly. I met someone named David through friends, a genuinely nice guy who worked in education and had no connection to tech whatsoever. I made sure Julia knew about him, made sure she saw us together, made sure she understood that I was happy and moving on with my life without her interference. As I expected, she tried to sabotage this relationship too. She showed up at a restaurant where she knew we'd be having dinner and coincidentally ran into us with a male model friend, making a scene about how awkward the timing was. She posted suggestive comments on David's social media. She told our mother that she'd heard concerning things about David from unnamed sources. But I'd warned David about Julia. I'd told him, carefully and without revealing my rebirth, that my sister had a history of interfering in my relationships out of jealousy. David, who had a toxic sister of his own, understood completely. Her attempts to drive us apart only made us stronger. This infuriated Julia. She was used to her manipulations working. She was used to being able to control narratives and situations. My imperviousness to her schemes was making her sloppy, desperate. That's when she reached out to Marcus. I knew she would. I'd been monitoring her social media carefully, and I'd noticed her posting throwback photos of old friends, tagging people from college, clearly rebuilding her network for something big. Marcus appeared in one of these photos, and I knew the plan was being set in motion. In the original timeline, Marcus had been her co-conspirator from the start. In this timeline, they'd lost contact after I broke up with him. But Julia was resourceful, and she needed someone with tech skills to help her execute whatever she was planning. Marcus, still bitter about the breakup and eager to prove himself to Julia, was the perfect tool. I watched and waited. I had security monitoring software on all my real devices, alerts set up for any unauthorized access attempts, and a private investigator tracking both Julia and Marcus. I was building a case, documenting everything, preparing for the moment when they would make their move. The trap I'd laid was elegant in its simplicity. The decoy laptop was connected to a private network that logged every keystroke, every file accessed, every attempt at data exfiltration. If someone tried to hack it, I would know. If someone tried to steal information from it, I would have a complete record. And if someone tried to frame me using information from it, I would be able to prove that the information had been accessed by an outside party. 6 weeks before the scheduled IPO, my apartment was broken into. I wasn't home. I was on a weekend trip to Boston with David, a trip I'd mentioned repeatedly in Julia's presence. The break-in was clean, professional. Nothing was obviously stolen. The door lock was picked, not forced. If I hadn't had a hidden security camera installed, I never would have known it happened. But I did have a camera, and it captured Marcus entering my apartment, going straight to my decoy laptop, and spending 45 minutes copying files onto a thumb drive. I didn't report it, not yet. Because this wasn't the endgame, this was just them gathering ammunition. They would need to do more to frame me properly, to make the setup look convincing. And I wanted to catch them in the act of actually executing the betrayal, not just preparing for it. I continued my normal life, pretending ignorance. I went to work. I saw David. I attended family dinners where Julia smiled at me with poisonous sweetness and asked how the IPO preparation was going. Complicated, I said. Lots of legal stuff, very boring. I'm sure you'll be rich soon, she said. And there was something in her voice, a brittleness, an edge of hysteria. You always land on your feet. Luck of the draw, I said, meeting her eyes. Or maybe just hard work. 2 weeks before the IPO, I got called into an emergency meeting with the company's executive team, board members, and legal counsel. Someone had leaked our proprietary algorithms to TechCorp, our biggest competitor. The leak had come from my credentials, from my system, during hours when I was logged into the building. An anonymous tipster had contacted the board claiming I'd been in communication with TechCorp for months, negotiating a sale price for the IP. Here we go, I thought. These are very serious allegations, the CEO said, looking at me with disappointment. I have to ask you directly, did you leak our IP? No, I said calmly, I didn't. Can you explain how your credentials were used to access and transfer these files? I can't, I said, Sana, but I can tell you that my apartment was broken into 3 weeks ago by my ex-boyfriend, Marcus Chen. He accessed my laptop and copied files. I have video evidence. I watched the room freeze. No one had expected me to have an immediate answer, let alone evidence. Why didn't you report this break-in? The legal counsel asked. Because I wanted to see what he planned to do with the information, I said. Marcus is the brother of my sister's boyfriend. This was a lie, but it was close enough to the truth to be believable, and it established the connection I needed. My sister, Julia Chen, has a history of jealousy toward me and has made multiple attempts to sabotage my relationships and career. I suspected they were working together, and I wanted documentation of the full conspiracy before I came forward. That's a very serious accusation, the CEO said slowly. I have proof, I said. I have security footage of the break-in. I have logs showing that the laptop he accessed was a decoy system I set up specifically because I suspected my sister was trying to access my work information. I have the serial numbers and metadata from that decoy system, which will match the leaked files. And I have a private investigator's report tracking communications between Julia and Marcus over the past 2 months. I'd been preparing this presentation for weeks. I had binders of evidence, time-stamped photos, phone records, everything organized and cross-referenced. I'd spent a significant chunk of my savings on the private investigator, but it was worth every penny. The board reviewed my evidence for 3 hours. They brought in forensic IT experts. They called the FBI because corporate espionage on this scale was a federal crime. And slowly, piece by piece, my story was corroborated. The leaked files contained subtle markers that I'd planted in the decoy system. Tiny errors in the code, deliberate typos in the comments, version numbers that didn't match our actual repository. When the forensic team examined my real work computer, they found none of these markers. When they pulled logs from the building's network, they could prove that while someone using my credentials had accessed the files, the physical location of the access didn't match my actual movements that day because I'd been in an all-day meeting with witnesses. Marcus had used a VPN and spoofed my login, but he hadn't been sophisticated enough to account for the physical network traceback. He'd thought the credentials would be enough. He'd been sloppy, overconfident, just like Julia had taught him to be. The FBI arrested Marcus within 24 hours. His apartment was searched, and they found the thumb drive with my stolen files, along with encrypted communications with TechCorp's corporate espionage team and evidence of the $75,000 payment he'd received for the information. During questioning, Marcus broke immediately. He confessed everything: the plan to infiltrate my life, the break-in, the data theft, and most importantly, he named Julia as his co-conspirator. Julia was arrested at our parents' house during Sunday dinner. I wasn't there. I'd stopped attending family dinners weeks earlier, claiming work was too demanding, but my mother called me, hysterical, barely coherent. "They arrested Julia. They're saying she tried to steal from your company. They're saying she's a criminal. You have to tell them it's a mistake." "It's not a mistake, Mom," I said quietly. "Julia has been trying to destroy my career for months. She's the one who sent Marcus to break into my apartment. She's the one who planned the whole thing." "You're lying, hub," my mother screamed. "You're jealous of your sister. You always have been. And now you're trying to ruin her life." "Look at the evidence," I said. "The FBI has phone records, text messages, financial transactions. Julia was the mastermind. She was going to frame me for corporate espionage, get me fired and arrested, and steal my stock options, just like she's stolen everything else from me my entire life." "I don't believe you. Julia would never—" "Yes, she would, Mom. She's been doing it since we were kids. You just never wanted to see it." I hung up and blocked her number. The fallout was spectacular. The FBI's case against Julia and Marcus was airtight. They both faced federal charges: conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, wire fraud, and computer fraud. The evidence I'd gathered, combined with the FBI's forensic investigation, painted a picture of a months-long conspiracy to steal millions of dollars worth of intellectual property. Marcus took a plea deal almost immediately, agreeing to testify against Julia in exchange for a reduced sentence. He provided detailed testimony about how Julia had recruited him, how she'd planned every step of the operation, how she'd been obsessed with destroying me and taking my place in the company. Julia, characteristically, tried to fight. She hired an expensive lawyer, paid for by our parents, who mortgaged their house to afford the legal fees, and claimed she was innocent, framed, victimized by her jealous older sister. She gave weepy interviews to local news stations, posted dramatic Instagram stories about being persecuted, and tried to rally her followers to her defense. But the evidence was overwhelming. Her phone records showed dozens of calls to Marcus. Her bank statements showed suspicious transactions that correlated with payments from TechCorp. Her search history included queries like how to frame someone for corporate espionage and can police track VPN usage. And Marcus's testimony was devastating. He described, in clinical detail, every conversation he'd had with Julia about me, how she'd obsessed over my success, how she'd monitored my social media constantly, spiraling into rage whenever I posted about something good happening in my life, how she'd said multiple times that I didn't deserve the stock options, that I wasn't as smart as everyone thought, that she should have been the successful one. She hated her sister, Marcus told the court. Not just disliked, hated. She said that everything good in her sister's life was stolen from her somehow, that the universe had made a mistake making her the younger sister instead of the older one. She wanted to, in her words, reset the balance. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Julia was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Marcus got 6 years for his cooperation. TechCorp's executives were also charged, and the company was fined $50 million for corporate espionage. Their reputation was destroyed, their stock price crashed, and they became a cautionary tale in the industry. My company, meanwhile, went public right on schedule. My role in uncovering and stopping the espionage attempt was publicly celebrated. I was interviewed by tech publications, invited to speak at conferences, and praised for my diligence and intelligence. My stock options were worth $12 million after the IPO. At 24 years old, I was a millionaire 12 times over, with a reputation as someone who'd single-handedly saved her company from destruction. Julia was an inmate in a federal prison wearing an orange jumpsuit with her damaged silver hair growing out in ugly brown roots. But I wasn't done. Julia's incarceration was satisfying, certainly, but there were other people who needed to face consequences for their roles in my original life's destruction. My parents, for instance. After Julia's conviction, they tried to contact me repeatedly. They called, emailed, showed up at my apartment building. They wanted me to help pay for Julia's appeals. They wanted me to visit her in prison. They wanted me to forgive her and move on because family is family and everyone makes mistakes. I ignored every attempt at contact. Then my mother showed up at my office. She somehow got past security, probably by claiming to be my mother, which technically she was, and cornered me in the lobby. "Please," she said, and she was crying, mascara running down her face. "Please help your sister. She made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve this. 8 years in prison will destroy her life." "She tried to destroy mine," I said coldly. "She planned it for months. She recruited a criminal to help her. She was going to frame me for a federal crime and steal millions of dollars from me." "That's not a mistake. That's a calculated, malicious attack." "She's your sister." "She stopped being my sister when she decided to ruin my life out of jealousy." "I don't understand how you can be so cruel," my mother said. "Where did I go wrong raising you?" And that's when I snapped. "Where did you go wrong?" I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Let me tell you where you went wrong, Mom. You went wrong every single time Julia copied me and you called it flattery. You went wrong when she manipulated me and you called it sibling rivalry. You went wrong when she sabotaged my relationships and you told me to be understanding. You went wrong every time you chose her over me, believed her lies over my truth, and enabled her sociopathic behavior because it was easier than admitting you'd raised a monster." My mother stared at me, shocked. "Julia is in prison because of her own choices," I continued. "Because she's a criminal who committed serious crimes. If you want to be angry at someone, be angry at her or be angry at yourself for creating an environment where she thought she could get away with anything. But don't you dare try to make me feel guilty for refusing to be her victim." "I won't help pay for her appeals," I said. "I won't visit her in prison. I won't speak to her, write to her, or acknowledge her existence. As far as I'm concerned, Julia is dead. And if you continue to harass me about this, I'll get a restraining order against both of you." I walked away and never looked back. My father tried once, a few weeks later, sending me a long email about forgiveness and family bonds and Christian values. I responded with a single line. "Julia tried to have me arrested for a crime I didn't commit, so she could steal my life's work. There is no forgiveness for that." He didn't write again. Eventually, I learned through mutual acquaintances that my parents had indeed lost their house trying to pay for Julia's defense. They'd moved to a small rental apartment in a bad neighborhood. My father had to come out of retirement to work part-time at Home Depot. My mother was selling her belongings on Facebook Marketplace. I felt nothing. They'd made their choice. They'd chosen Julia again, just like they always had. The fact that it ruined them financially was their problem, not mine. Meanwhile, my life bloomed. The company continued to grow post-IPO. I was promoted to senior engineer, then to engineering director, then to VP of technology. My initial stock grant vested completely, and I received additional grants as part of my promotions. By the time I was 27, my net worth exceeded $30 million. I bought a penthouse in Tribeca, the same building Julia had coveted in my first life, though she'd never lived there in this timeline. I furnished it with original art and designer furniture. I hired an interior decorator who made it look like something from Architectural Digest. I maintained my relationship with David, and we eventually got married in an intimate ceremony on the Amalfi Coast. He understood my history with Julia. I'd told him a carefully edited version of the truth, omitting only the rebirth aspect, and he supported my decision to cut off my family completely. I made new friends, real friends, in the tech industry and beyond. I mentored young women in STEM. I donated anonymously to organizations that helped victims of family abuse and manipulation. I built a life that was full, rich, and entirely my own, and I kept my hair silver. Perfect, professional, maintained silver platinum that cost $500 every 6 weeks and looked like moonlight. Julia's hair, the last time I saw her in a prison photo that appeared in a news article about corporate espionage, had gone back to brown. Dull, lifeless brown with gray roots starting to show. She was 32 in that photo, looking 45 with deep lines around her mouth and eyes. She got out of prison last year after serving 6 years with good behavior. I heard through the grapevine that she was living in a halfway house in New Jersey, working at a call center, trying to rebuild her life with a felony record and no real skills. Marcus got out around the same time and immediately violated his parole. He's back in prison now, serving an additional 5 years. My parents are still alive, still struggling financially, still living in that rental apartment. I heard my father had a heart attack last year. Non-fatal, but serious. My mother sent me an email asking if I would help with the medical bills. I deleted it without responding. There's a photo on my desk in my corner office taken at a company event last year. I'm standing with the CEO and the board chair, all of us holding champagne glasses, celebrating another successful fiscal year. My hair is perfectly styled, silvery white and luminous under the professional lighting. I'm wearing a custom Armani suit that costs more than my parents' monthly rent. I'm smiling, genuinely happy, surrounded by people who respect and value me for my intelligence and contributions. Sometimes late at night, I think about my first life, the pain, the betrayal, the way Julia had systematically destroyed everything I'd built and convinced everyone I was the problem, the way I'd died alone and broken, having lost everything to her manipulations. And then I think about this life, the way I'd turned the tables, the way I'd used the knowledge from my death and rebirth to not just survive but to thrive, the way I'd taken every advantage she'd tried to create for herself and transformed it into a trap that snapped shut on her instead. Julia had always wanted to be me. She'd spent her entire life copying me, competing with me, trying to steal my accomplishments and wear them as her own. So I gave her the opportunity to try. I let her think she was succeeding, let her get close enough to make her move, and then I watched as she destroyed herself with her own greed and jealousy. The silver hair was just a symbol, really. A test to see if she'd learned anything, if she'd grown at all, if she could resist the compulsion to copy me one more time. When she failed that test, when she showed up with her cheap, damaged imitation of my expensive professional color, I knew she hadn't changed. I knew she would try to destroy me again, just like she had in my first life. And I was ready. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty. If I should feel bad that my sister is a convicted felon with a ruined life, that my parents are struggling in poverty, that I've cut off my entire biological family without a second thought. But then I remember dying alone in my childhood bedroom, having lost everything to Julia's schemes while she lived in luxury on the ruins of my dreams. I remember the pills dissolving on my tongue. I remember the pain of a life stolen, and I feel nothing but satisfaction. Julia wanted to be me so badly that she destroyed herself trying. She couldn't stand that I was smarter, more successful, more deserving. She couldn't accept that her own mediocrity wasn't my fault. So she tried to take what I'd earned, and in doing so, she lost everything. The universe gave me a second chance at life, and I used it to ensure that justice was served. Not the justice of the legal system, though that was satisfying, but the justice of karma, of consequences, of people getting exactly what they deserve. Julia deserved prison. My parents deserved poverty and isolation. Marcus deserved a longer sentence. And I deserved everything I have now. My name is Vivian Chen. I'm 31 years old. I'm the CTO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company. I live in a penthouse in Manhattan with my husband and our cat. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I have power, respect, and a reputation as one of the brightest minds in artificial intelligence. And I have silver hair that costs $3,000 to achieve and looks like liquid starlight. Julia tried to copy it with a $40 box dye and ended up looking cheap, desperate, and sad. Just like everything else she's ever tried to take from me, she couldn't do it right. She couldn't be me, no matter how hard she tried. Because there's only one Vivian Chen, and I'm the one with the happy ending. I'm in my office now on the 53rd floor of our Manhattan headquarters, looking out over the city. It's late, almost midnight, but I like working when the office is empty, when it's just me and the soft glow of the screens and the city lights below. There's a knock on my door and my assistant pokes her head in. "Ms. Chen, sorry to bother you. There's a woman in the lobby claiming to be your sister. Security called for approval to send her up. She's quite insistent." Julia, out of prison for a year and finally worked up the courage to confront me. "What does she want?" I ask, already knowing the answer. "She says she needs to talk to you. She says it's important, that it's about family." I could refuse. I could have security escort her out, get a restraining order, make it clear she's not welcome in my life ever again. But I'm curious. I want to see her. I want to see what prison did to her, what 6 years of consequences look like on a person who thought they were invincible. "Send her up," I say, "but have security wait outside my office." 5 minutes later, Julia walks through my door, and I almost don't recognize her. She's thin, gaunt, actually, with the hollowed-out look of someone who's been through serious trauma. Her hair is that dull brown again, pulled back in a messy ponytail, showing significant gray at the temples, even though she's only 31. She's wearing cheap clothes from Target or Walmart, wrinkled and ill-fitting. She has no makeup on, and her skin is sallow, aged beyond her years. She looks like she's 50. I, on the other hand, am wearing a cream-colored Chanel suit with my hair freshly colored and styled, blown out in soft waves that frame my face. I probably look younger now than I did at 23, thanks to professional skincare, good nutrition, minimal stress, and the kind of self-care that unlimited money can buy. The contrast between us is so stark, it's almost comical. "Hello, Julia," I say, not getting up from my desk. "Vivian," her voice is hoarse, uncertain. "Thank you for seeing me." "I haven't decided if I'm going to see you yet," I say. "I'm just curious what you could possibly want from me after trying to have me arrested and imprisoned." She flinches. I wanted to apologize." "Apologize?" "Yes, I've had a lot of time to think in prison. A lot of therapy. I've realized how sick I was, how obsessed I was with you. How I let jealousy destroy my life and almost destroyed yours." The words sound rehearsed, like she's practiced them. "I know I can never make up for what I did. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." I lean back in my chair and study her. "Are you sorry for what you did? Or are you sorry that you got caught?" "Both," she admits, and I appreciate the honesty at least. "But mostly for what I did. I was wrong. I was cruel. I was insane, honestly. I couldn't stand seeing you succeed. It ate at me every day. I should have been happy for you. I should have been proud to have such an accomplished sister. Instead, I tried to tear you down." "Yes, you did." "I'm in therapy now," she continues. 3 times a week. Working on my personality disorder, my envy, my inability to celebrate other people's success without feeling diminished. It's hard work, but I'm trying to be better." "Good for you," I say, and I mean it to sound as dismissive as it does. She swallows hard. "I'm not here to ask for money or a job or anything like that. I know you owe me nothing. I wanted to see you, to tell you I'm sorry in person, to try to understand how you knew. how you were so prepared. You want to know how I caught you? I ask. Yes, she says. It's been driving me crazy. We were so careful. Marcus was sure we'd covered everything. But you had evidence we didn't even know existed. Cameras we didn't know about. Logs we thought we'd erased. It was like you knew exactly what we were going to do before we did it. I smile slowly. I did know. How? Because you're predictable, Julia. You've been trying to steal my life since we were children. You wanted everything I had. My friends, my boyfriends, my opportunities, my success. I knew that when I became successful, you wouldn't be able to help yourself. You'd try to take it from me, just like you'd tried to take everything else. So you set a trap. I protected myself, I correct. I documented everything, secured my systems, and watched you walk right into your own destruction. You did this to yourself, Julia. I just made sure there were consequences this time. She's quiet for a long moment, and I see tears starting to form in her eyes. Real tears for once, not the manipulative crying she used to weaponize against me. I've lost everything, she says quietly. My freedom, my reputation, my relationship with mom and dad, any chance at a normal life. No one will hire me with a felony record. I'm living in a halfway house, working at a call center for minimum wage, trying to figure out how to survive. And you, she looks around my office at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the expensive furniture, the awards on the walls. You have everything, she finishes. Yes, I say simply, I do. Do you ever think about what it would have been like if we'd been different? If I hadn't been so jealous? If we could have been real sisters, supporting each other instead of competing? No, I lie. Because I do think about it sometimes late at night. I think about what it would have been like to have a sister who celebrated my successes, who I could call when something good happened, who would have been my maid of honor at my wedding instead of David's sister, who I barely knew. But that was never who Julia was, in either timeline. I should go, Julia says, wiping her eyes. I won't bother you again. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry and that I understand why you hate me. I don't hate you, I say, and it's true. Hate requires emotional investment. I feel nothing for you at all. She nods, accepting this, and turns to leave. Julia, I call out, and she stops at the door. Your hair. What about it? It looks better brown, I say. The silver never suited you anyway. She looks back at me, and for just a moment, I see a flash of the old Julia, the envious, bitter, competitive sister who couldn't stand to be second best. But then it's gone, replaced by resignation and defeat. Yeah, she says quietly. I know. She leaves, escorted out by security, and I watch from my window as she walks out of the building into the cold Manhattan night, pulling her thin coat tighter around her shoulders. I return to my work, to my perfect life, to my silver hair that catches the light from my computer screen. And I smile. Because this is what justice looks like. This is what happens when karma finally catches up to people who thought they could destroy others without consequences. Julia wanted to be me so badly that she destroyed her entire life trying. And I got everything she ever wanted, everything she tried to steal, everything she thought should have been hers. She looked cheap because she was cheap. Cheap in spirit, cheap in morals, cheap in every way that mattered. While I became priceless. The story of two sisters, one silver-haired and successful, one broken and defeated, ends not with reconciliation or redemption, but with the simple truth that actions have consequences and some betrayals are too deep to ever be forgiven. I am Vivian Chen, CTO of a tech unicorn, with silver hair that costs more than Julia makes in a month, and I am finally, completely, triumphantly free.